Greetings, fellow humans. It is not really much of a secret that things haven't really gone that well for me lately, for various reasons or other, and what I thought I might do is talk about something that's a little personal for me because it's something that's been on my mind as of late. When you're born, you don't get to choose your features like you would in a video game. You could make your playable character tall, muscular, with long flowing golden hair, knows 5 languages and has a pretty awesome name like Max Power, Danny Invincible, or Joey Jojo Jr. Shabadoo. No, you don't get to choose what you're born with, and at some point or another in your life, you might go through some anguish and anxiety about one of your personal traits. For me, lately, well, not lately as it's been going on for years, but with varying degrees of intensity. But anyway, for me, one of the biggest factors that predetermined how my life would go is being born deaf, and to this day I'm still unclear about the reasoning behind it, as it wasn't a genetic thing or anything. I remember being told about a doctor screw up or something. I should probably find out, and I would, except the reasoning has never really bothered me because it is what it is, and there's no change in that, and as I'm still going to be stuck in this soundproof world. Imagine being in a soundproof room where you cannot hear anything from the outside of it, but everything inside the room represents what you can hear. Now imagine those walls shrinking around you and getting so tight that there is no space for anything else, so people can't enter that room. Televisions, radios, everything has no space inside. The room has just become so small that you cannot even hear yourself. You know what you're saying, but you just cannot hear the words. Now imagine living like that for 24 years. This next part doesn't really apply to every deaf person, and I suspect it's due to a combination of factors like my own personality, my experiences and handicap. But basically, have you ever heard the expression that you can barely hear yourself think? It's commonly used in context with more noisy places, but I use that expression because for me, in this soundproof world, it's never too noisy to hear myself think, and believe me, that's not a good thing. Noise is distracting. Noise can often bring you back into the real world whenever you venture inside the world of your own thoughts. In fact, any one of your senses can bring you back but when one of your senses is impaired, it becomes that much harder to be dragged back into the real world, which means I've had more time than usual to venture and get lost in my own world of my own thoughts. When you spend a bit of time inside your own world, things can turn dark pretty quickly, and that's why I listen to music as often as I can, because sometimes I don't want to get into that dark world. To sum that up, when you cannot hear things, you'll have plenty of time to think about stuff. In fact, you'll have more time than usual because you cannot converse effectively with others, which is why I naturally prefer talking one-to-one or small groups, as it takes a lot of effort in large group conversations when there's so many voices to focus on. Something that I know a lot of my fellow deaf people like to talk about often is about being deaf aware. And one of the things that helps is circles, because theoretically in a circle a person should be able to see everyone else, and vision to a deaf person counts for a lot of things, as being able to lip read a person can more than make up for any words that might be missed in a conversation and whatnot. That's why there's a fair bit of manipulating by me going on in regards to where I stand and where I sit with others. When you see me sitting on the end or whatever, it isn't because it's my favourite spot or I'm fussy like that. No. Well, I am. But I go there because it makes the most auditory sense. It's so you're not talking to the back of my head, or that I have to admire that beautiful neck of yours when you're telling me how amazing the latest Breaking Bad episode is, or how amazing that Pharrell song Happy is, which, by the way, I think is painfully average to me, but that's neither here nor there. So when I'm not just understanding what's being said, I will drift into my own thoughts, and believe me, the amount of times I've had to mentally slap myself in the back of the head and focus is ridiculous, but it's what I have to do to make sure I'm keeping up with what's going on in the conversation. Of course, the layout of the room or the situation at times may mean that it's not possible for everyone to be in a circle. I'd imagine we'd look pretty ridiculous walking down the street in a circle, but yeah, So times like that requires a lot of focus and concentration, and inevitably things will get missed because I can be a little bit too polite to ask someone to repeat something. Words and even whole sentences will get lost in the soundless abyss, and it's quite the frustrating experience. Sometimes in the context of the bigger conversation, what one person said might not be important, but because, as I said, due to my personality, I like to be meticulous at times. I might not know if what was said will turn out to be a crucial information about an event happening on that Wednesday, or even just as a joke. After all, a man walks into a bar and speaks to the bartender. See, the punchline of "we only have plain" isn't quite as funny if you didn't hear that the man actually asked the bartender if they had any helicopter flavoured crisps in the first place. In my day-to-day life, I have to talk to a lot of people that I've never met before, and I'm meeting for the first time, and one of the more annoying situations I face is when I ask someone to repeat themselves, and then the other person proceeds to repeat it in exactly the same way that they did last time. Same clarity, same volume, same speed, same everything, which naturally is still not going to be heard. That can be quite annoying, as it would make sense that if a person didn't catch what you said the first time, then you probably should make yourself a little bit clearer. But alas, some don't, and then the real kick in the teeth is when you get, "Oh, it doesn't matter." It bugs me because if you're going for the trouble of repeating it 2, maybe 3 times, to say it doesn't matter can make a deaf person feel like they don't matter. Even if what was said was the most trivial thing in the world, we just missed out on a great conversation about Age of Mythology or the state of television programming aimed for children, all because you didn't want to repeat that you were wondering how Nike was pronounced, or that the only piece of French that you knew was omelette du fromage. For me personally, because I'm always thinking a lot, I get anxious when people say it doesn't matter, because to me it does. I hate being reminded about my own limitations, that I'm not exactly the same as everyone else. It's not out of a desire to fit in and belong, but more out of a desire to prove that I can do things just as well as anyone else. To say it doesn't matter says to me that my effort in trying to not let my deafness affect the quality of my life isn't important. Again, this might just be me and how my mind works with analysing situations, and it doesn't necessarily translate to all the other deaf people, but I feel I worry about it much more than I need to. What to do about it? Well, to be honest, I'm not really sure myself. Things aren't really going to change. Asking me to think on it less is like asking not to think about Christmas during December. No matter what you do, almost everything is going to remind you one way or another about it. In a world filled with sound, it's pretty hard to not be reminded that your experience is going to be limited and different to others. That's why I never introduced myself as being deaf. No, 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 no. You don't find out that piece of information until much later, because it's not something I feel you should define me by. First and foremost, I am a human first. Personally, a phone conversation or an email doesn't start with you mentioning, "Oh, I'm black, white, Asian," or "Oh, I'm gay, bisexual, pansexual," or "Oh, I have a criminal record," or "I have one arm," because a lot of the times that piece of information just isn't relevant, and none of those factors should be used to judge someone. There is a little bit of a downside here to this, as unfortunately that sometimes leads to the misconception that I'm a quiet, reserved, sometimes rude sort of person, but those that know me, especially those that really have got to know me, know that's not necessarily the case, because while I may be all of those things at times, I doubt it's the first impression people would or should be having of me if I weren't deaf. But alas, that's the way things are, and first impressions count for a lot of things. I can't count the number of times I'm just doing my own thing, and then people have just spoken to me and gotten no response from me simply because I've never heard them. Sometimes I actually wonder if they think I'm just being rude, spaced out, or whatever. And then when they tell me that they've been calling me for ages, it annoys me because, again, it reminds me of my limitations, and then I feel I have to apologise to them when really I have nothing to apologise for. Anyway, it's something I've just been conscious of lately. I just spend more time than I really need to just reflecting on it. I remember thinking of the character Edward Elric from Full Metal Alchemist and his prosthetic automail arm and leg. And I think in one episode it gets destroyed or something, and he's practically helpless, and it hits him hard. And it kind of reminds me, it's kind of similar to how I feel about my hearing aids and how reliant I am on them, and it just puts me into a complete state of depression whenever they get broken or anything goes wrong with them, because my hearing aids are like a key that allow me to push those soundproof walls away from my body and give me more space. And when the hearing aids are out, then that space shrinks once again. It's not all doom and gloom though. As with optional silence, you're able to use it to your advantage, and some of the benefits do include being able to sleep soundly at night or whenever really. And as I won't be disturbed by trains, police sirens, snorers and the likes. Plus there's the benefit of being able to cut off one sense so you can focus on something such as reading, playing a game or doing revision, even if I do get a little too absorbed in what I'm doing. Oh, and the common joke about how I can just switch off my hearing aids if I'm talking to someone I don't like to cut off their voice. Jokes aside, I'm far too polite to do that, and I never will, because when I was a kid I did that to my mum, and bad mistake. Never again. Never again. Anyway, that's pretty much it, and I appreciate you watching this video if you made it this far, and perhaps you understand a little about what's been going through my head as of late, and by extension how a regular deaf person copes. So yeah, that's all from me. Take care of yourself, and I shall try to do the same too.